Stories of the week, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Ngullie. It's September and you can already feel the winter there. By this time, I believe some villages in the state of Nagaland will already be playing Christmas songs, which is not a bad thing. We can actually play Christmas songs in the middle of August. And now September is already here. I think that all of us might be feeling the spirit of Christmas not far away. A lot of dancing, a lot of food and eating, Christmas and New Year's and many more to come. You can already feel it in the air. Of course, Dimapur is still hot and exceptionally cranky. It also reminds of course, sadly, the dengue cases across the state of Nagaland. I believe a substantial number of people have struggled through it, and God bless the souls of those who have passed away from dengue cases in the recent past several weeks, ladies and gentlemen. The summer also brought a lot of conjunctivitis cases to a number big enough to force our schools to close for a while. Besides that, we have had national and international events, including the ongoing G20 summit in Delhi, from which we believe significant declarations will be made. Especially with India being the president of this event this time, I think we can expect major declarations, especially in regard to India's relations with its neighbor, specific to China and of course Pakistan. Here are the top newsmakers of the week, ladies and gentlemen, some of which continues to keep the news establishments, TV channels, newspapers busy. Times are really exciting for the Indian Space Research Organization. On August 23rd, the ISRO launched India's lunar mission, the Chandrayaan-3, and successfully landed it on the moon's south pole. You may have read about this earlier. Next came another big one. The ISRO's Vikram lander, which is currently on the moon's south pole, successfully underwent what the establishment called a hop experiment. The organization said that the lander exceeded its mission objective, and on command it fired the engines, elevated itself by about 40 centimeters as expected, and landed safely at a distance of 30 to 40 centimeters away. The importance of this development, ladies and gentlemen, according to the ISRO, it will purpose future sample returns and human missions to the moon. For those of you who might want to know, and for those wondering if India will ever send an Indian to space, here is big news. India has already sent a man to space, ladies and gentlemen. Indian military pilot Rakesh Sharma is the first Indian citizen in space. All you young ones who have never attended school or who have bunked classes and you have never read about this, of course, India has already gone to space. So Rakesh Sharma's journey in 1984 was a joint collaboration between the ISRO and the Soviet Intercosmos space program in the erstwhile USSR, or Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Yes, Russia used to be known as USSR, or Soviet Union, before the communist regime fell in 1991, ladies and gentlemen. That is for all you young ones. Anyhow, Rakesh Sharma and two Soviet cosmonauts flew to space for a 21-day and 40 minutes journey. So India already has a bragging right in the space industry, ladies and gentlemen. Don't ever let people talk you down. Now back to the Vikram lander story. The Indian Space Research Organization said the ramp and the lander payloads folded back and redeployed successfully after the hop experiment. Congratulations again, ISRO. The French philosopher and author Albert Camus once said, "A free press can be good or bad, but without freedom, the press will never be anything but bad." The press and information media in India continue to be attacked by powers that be because the value system of the media often refuse to work with narratives of those in power, especially governments, state and central governments. While many news organizations have lost credibility and no longer enjoy the trust of the public the way they used to, there still are democratic platforms that pursue facts and truth. These few platforms become targets of government establishments, ladies and gentlemen. And I think in India, you have been seeing a lot of these events happening, with the Manipur conflict having grabbed national and international headlines since May this year, when two communities, the Mighty and the Kuki communities, went against each other. It was the media that became the target, the scapegoat. And this is what's been happening, I believe. Manipur Chief Minister N. Biren Singh termed the report of the Editors Guild of India's fact-finding team on the Manipur violence as baseless, unfounded. That's what he termed the fact-finding team's report. Addressing a press conference earlier, the Chief Minister said that the state government had filed an FIR against the President and 3 members of the Editors Guild of India, accusing them of trying to create more clashes in the state. That was the accusation from the Manipur government against the journalists. Again, Biren Singh also questioned how much does the EGI know about the complexity of Northeast? It sounded a bit condescending, but all right. Anyway, terming the report shameful, the Manipur Chief Minister claimed that the report lacked factual information regarding reserved forests and eviction processes by the state government. Biren Singh, he also naturally and not surprisingly called the report anti-state and anti-establishment. Do you remember those times in Nagaland when the Naga underground organizations used to call you anti-Naga, anti-national every time you criticize them? They used to call us, oh, Indian agent, and I think that has been the norm for quite some time now. For those of you who might want to have a context, the Editors Guild recently claimed that the media's report on the ethnic violence in Manipur were one-sided and had accused the state leadership of being partisan. The Press Club of India also strongly condemned the police case by the Manipur authorities against the Editors Guild. By the way, this is the latest in the case. The Supreme Court has actually ordered protection of the journalists from arrest by the Manipur police. The Supreme Court issued an order on September 6 to protect the Editors Guild of India, the president of the Editors Guild, and 3 senior journalists from arrest by the Manipur police for their ground report. May the truth prevail. Let's check out the next news, ladies and gentlemen. Which one do you prefer, India or Bharat? This was the debate that erupted a few days ago after the government of India issued G20 dinner invitation cards stating President of Bharat instead of President of India, which used to be the norm. The debate began to stir as reports of a possible resolution to rename India as Bharat emerged. The speculations were that the BJP-led government at the center might introduce a resolution during the Parliament's upcoming special session scheduled for September 18 to the 22nd to rename the country. That was the speculations. An official dinner invite to G20 delegates from the government surfaced on Tuesday, which set up the controversy. These invitations had President of Bharat written on it instead of the usual President of India or President of Prime Minister of India. The opposition parties had recently named their political alliance Indian National Developmental Inclusive Alliance, or known more by its acronym India. So interestingly, some went as far as to call India a British name, and that it symbolized colonial slavery. But actually, here's the news. It is not a British name. India is not a British name. The name India goes even as far as 440 BC and mentioned by the father of history himself, the Greek historian and geographer Herodotus, and even by the ancient Greek historian and diplomat in 330 BC. In fact, India is written in Egyptian hieroglyphs on the statue of Darius I during 500 BCE. It goes all the way back. The philosopher and historian Megasthenes was sent by the Hellenistic king Seleucus I to the Mauryan emperor Chandragupta. He gave the most complete account of India then known to the Greek world, and was the source for work by the later historians such as Diodotus, Strabo, Pliny and Aryan. Let's check out the next news. The first official meeting of the One Nation, One Election Committee was reported to have been in the making on September 6 in New Delhi, ladies and gentlemen. And I think this event has been taking a lot of media space in the country. It was reported that the meeting was to take place under the chairmanship of former President Mr. Ramnath Kovind at his residence in Delhi. So far, there's been no hard information in this regard and the developments associated with it. Earlier, the government of India had formed a panel headed by Ramnath Kovind to explore the possibility of implementing a one nation and one election rule across the country, which subsequently also sparked a buzz about the possibility of early Lok Sabha polls. The committee was to assess and propose specific changes to the Constitution and the Representation of the People's Act and any other relevant laws and regulations that might be necessary to enable simultaneous Lok Sabha and state assembly elections across the country. It will also examine and recommend whether the amendments to the Constitution would require ratification by the states. That was the report we got earlier. The committee will also analyze and recommend possible solutions to scenarios such as a hung house, a hung assembly, the adoption of a non-confidence motion, or defection by parties and their leaders, or any such other events in case of simultaneous polls, and how they are going to tackle those incidents. The heart of the proposal to have a nationwide election is to synchronize the timing of the Lok Sabha and the state assembly elections across the states in India. So the idea is to reduce the frequency of polls throughout the country. The concept was this concept was practiced till 1967, ladies and gentlemen, but it was disrupted due to various reasons such as defections, dismissals, and dissolutions of the government. Then the cycle was first broken in 1959 after the center invoked Article 356 to dismiss the then Kerala state government. It was broken during the time. Subsequently, due to defections and counter defections between parties, several legislative assemblies dissolved post 1960, which eventually led to a separate poll system for Lok Sabha and the state assembly elections. So let's check out some of the pros and cons here, ladies and gentlemen, in regard to whether, if in case the one nation, one election policy comes in place, what might be some of the pros here, some of the advantages and some of the disadvantages in this regard. Here are the advantages. First thing, and they're not really a lot, polling is expensive, first thing, but organizing state assembly and Lok Sabha elections simultaneously may reduce the cost and the expenditure outlay here in this regard on the state government and the state. So it might reduce expenditure a little bit. It might be difficult, but this is one of the main selling points of this particular proposal. Besides, simultaneous elections may save time, and the government can get 5 stable years to focus on governance and administrative duties across the states instead of just focusing on winning polls. And then second, weak state governments. To ensure that the state government does not fall without an alternative, the Law Commission recommended that a no confidence motion against the government should be followed by a confidence motion again, so that if in case the opposition sides doesn't have the numbers to form an alternative government, the regime in office cannot be removed. And these are the points by people who oppose the one nation and one election policy. To implement one nation and one election policy, 5 articles in the Constitution of India and the Representation of the People's Act of 1951 will have to be changed and amended. Every recognized state and national party would have to agree to this change, which at this time is virtually impossible. There are about 28 states and 8 union territories in the country, ladies and gentlemen. Each of them are ruled by coalitions or single parties, including regional parties, and not only the BJP and the Congress. So it will be problematic for the central government to have the agreement of all the state governments in regard to amending the Representation of the People Act and other acts that is related to the constitutional framework of the governance and of the governance of the states themselves. So what about the provision for the state assemblies that result in hung legislatures, or what about the premature dissolution of governments at the state level right after nationwide elections? Does every state in India have to go to the polls again if in case there is a hung government after a nationwide poll, whether at the center or at the state? No. Then there will be required a lot of provisions for state assemblies that come into hung situations. If the center will continue to have the power to dismiss the state government, which is under Article 356, there cannot be a one nation and one election policy, ladies and gentlemen. Again, another problem is voters may end up voting on national issues even for state balls, because everyone is campaigning. You don't know who is campaigning for whom, which manifesto is, or which parties. So there will be a lot of confusion in here. So the village level units might be voting in favor of a candidate just because they listen to someone on TV speaking about a national issue, and for which they might have thought, oh, this is for me, so I'm going to vote for them. There will be a lot of confusion, especially in regard to policy directions and manifestos of the political parties. This will benefit only national parties and undermine the vote share of smaller regional parties. Again, another point is that democratic and representative ballots have always projected an image of invincibility and popularity for any elected leader. A wave of one person or one issue might give unbridled power to rule for those who come to power. This actually is being seen in China. I really hope India doesn't become the monster it is fighting. Then there are national security issues. The governments are the beacon for the administrative apparatus of the country and the states. Practically every state government machinery, from health to the police and to public health services, and even amenities like water and electricity services, and all the establishments, including the medical establishment, the health establishments, and even the schools, the colleges, will be pressed into service for in one way or the other to accommodate the one nation, one election activities. So it's going to be very, very problematic. And then another and one of the biggest concerns here for those who are opposing the one nation, one election policy is that national security. Amid an event as enormous as a nationwide election in a country like India, what if a natural calamity strikes, like the way it happened in the Northeast and then in Himachal Pradesh? Or if a major internal disturbance not related to the elections take place, like the Naxalites and the Maoists start violence and it becomes a major issue? What if hostile countries attacks your borders, like let's say China or Pakistan? And I believe a lot of people might be wanting to take advantage of this in case we go for one nation, one election policy. What if there are major constitutional events at the center that cannot be ignored amid the nationwide elections? So these are some of the problems that we have to first see. In fact, election time will be a very sensitive and vulnerable time for policy making, and it will also be difficult for the state establishments to actually organize a cohesive and an organized solution to any problems that might come up later on. So these are some of the problems that people who have been really opposing the one nation, one election policy are raising, so that the government just keep the status quo as we have now and instead focus on other welfare and developmental agenda. Those were the top news stories of the week, ladies and gentlemen. Keep watching Hornbill TV and thank you for watching us. I'm Ngullie. See you next time.